The first gunshot Clara Mae Mason heard that morning was the one that killed her hopes of finding a husband. The second was the one that brought Zach Irving into her life. Clara stood on the porch of her family's small farmhouse outside Wickenburg, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1883, watching as her father's shotgun blast tore through the letter she'd received yesterday. The paper fragments scattered like wounded butterflies across the dusty yard. "What I tell you, Clara." Mason Tucker's weathered face showed no remorse as he lowered the smoking barrel. "Ain't no use in dreaming. No respectable man's taking a woman with a twisted foot for a wife." Clara's hand instinctively went to her skirt, as if to hide the malformed right foot she'd been born with. At 22, she'd long since made peace with the limp that had defined her life, but her father never missed an opportunity to remind her of what he considered her greatest failure. "It was just a correspondence, Pa," she said quietly. "Mrs. Wilkins in town said many women find husbands that way, not women like you." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Best accept your place, girl. You'll stay here and care for your ma and me until we're gone, then you'll have this patch of dirt to yourself. That's your lot." Before Clara could respond, the sound of hoofbeats caught their attention. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the rising Arizona sun, making his way down the winding path toward their homestead. "Who's that?" Mason squinted, raising his shotgun again. Strangers in these parts were rarely good news. Clara's mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Put that gun down, Mason. It's probably just a traveler looking for directions." As the rider drew closer, Clara could make out a tall figure atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. The man rode with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. His dark hat was pulled low, but she could see the strong line of his jaw and the glint of eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He reined in his horse about 20 feet from the porch, raising one hand slowly to show he meant no harm. With his other, he pushed his hat back, revealing a face that made Clara's breath catch. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way, but there was something magnetic about him: weathered skin stretched over high cheekbones, a straight nose that had clearly been broken at least once, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Morning," he called, his voice carrying a hint of Texas in its drawl. "Name's Zachariah Irving. Most folks call me Zach. Hope I'm not intruding." Mason lowered his shotgun slightly but kept it ready. "What business you got here, Mr. Irving?" "I'm looking for work," Zach replied easily. "Heard at Wickenburg's saloon that you might need help with your cattle, Mr. Tucker." Clara's father snorted. "Who told you that lie? We got no cattle to speak of, just a few scraggly cows and this sorry excuse for a farm." "Well, that's not what Sheriff Downing said," Zach countered, undeterred. "Said you've been complaining about needing an extra pair of hands since your accident." Clara glanced at her father's left arm, which hung stiffly at his side, a permanent reminder of the day he'd been thrown from a horse and landed badly 2 summers ago. Since then, the farm had suffered, with her mother and Clara struggling to keep up with the work. "I don't need charity," Mason growled. Zach shrugged. "Not offering any. I need honest work and a place to stay for a spell. I'll work from sunup to sundown for room, board, and fair wages." While her father hesitated, Clara studied the stranger. There was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't telling them everything, but nothing about him suggested danger. If anything, she sensed a deep weariness beneath his confident exterior. "Pa," she said softly, "we do need the help." Her mother stepped forward. "The girl's right, Mason. Winter's coming and we're behind on everything." After a long moment, Mason nodded curtly. "You can stay in the old bunkhouse out back. It ain't much, but it's got a roof. $3 a week plus meals. You steal anything, I'll shoot you." "Fair enough," Zach said, swinging down from his horse with fluid grace. As his boots hit the ground, he turned and his gaze met Clara's for the first time. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of sorts that Clara couldn't explain. Then he smiled, a slight curve of lips that transformed his serious face, and tipped his hat to her. "Madam," he said simply, and Clara felt her cheeks warm. "This is our daughter, Clara," her mother said. "I'm Clara Tucker." "Pleasure to meet you both," Zach replied, his eyes lingering on Clara for a moment longer than necessary before he turned his attention back to Mason. "Where would you like me to start, sir? North fence needs mending. Clara can show you where the tools are." Mason turned and stomped back into the house, the conversation clearly over as far as he was concerned. Clara gave Zach an apologetic smile. "He's rough around the edges, but he's fair. Clara will show you to the bunkhouse after you've seen to your horse." After her mother disappeared inside, Clara found herself alone with the stranger. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, laugh lines, her mother would call them, and a thin scar that ran along his jawline. "Your horse is beautiful," she said, immediately feeling foolish for the mundane observation, but Zach just smiled. "Samson's a good boy, been with me through thick and thin." He patted the stallion's neck affectionately. "Is there a stable I can put him in?" "This way," Clara said, turning toward the small barn behind the house. She was acutely aware of her limp as she walked, waiting for the inevitable question or worse, the look of pity that usually followed. It never came. Zach matched his stride to hers without comment, leading Samson by the reins. "You've been in Wickenburg long?" she asked to fill the silence. "Just rode in yesterday," he replied. "Been moving around a bit, Texas originally." "I thought I heard it in your voice," Clara said, opening the barn door. "There's an empty stall at the end there. Water trough is outside." While Zach tended to his horse, Clara lingered, watching how gently his large hands moved as he unsaddled Samson and brushed him down. There was something calming about the methodical way he worked, humming softly under his breath. "So what was your pa shooting at earlier?" he asked casually, not looking up from his task. Clara stiffened. "You saw that? Hard to miss a shotgun blast when you're riding up," he said with a small smile. "Hope I wasn't interrupting a family dispute." "No, nothing like that," she replied, embarrassment washing over her. "Just Pa being Pa. He was shooting at a letter." Zach raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Well, I've seen men shoot at stranger things." When Samson was settled with fresh hay, Clara led Zach to the small, weathered bunkhouse. It had once housed several ranch hands back when the Tucker place had been more prosperous, but it had stood empty for years now. "It's not much," she apologized, pushing open the door to reveal a dusty interior with a simple cot, a rickety table, and a wood stove. "It's perfect," Zach said, dropping his saddlebags on the cot. "I've slept under the stars more nights than not lately. This is downright luxurious." Clara couldn't tell if he was being kind or if his standards were truly that low. "I'll bring you some fresh linens and get the stove going. It gets cold at night." "Thank you, Miss Tucker, I appreciate your hospitality." "Clara," she corrected him. "Just Clara is fine," he nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Clara, then." For the next week, Zach proved himself to be everything he'd promised and more. He worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, tending to the few animals they had, and even fixing the leaky roof that had plagued them all summer. Mason grudgingly admitted that hiring him had been a good decision, though never within Zach's hearing. Clara found herself watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice the way the muscles in his arms flexed as he chopped wood. How his face lit up when he laughed at something her mother said. the gentleness with which he handled their elderly milk cow. There was a quiet strength about him that drew her in, though she tried to keep her distance. Men like Zachariah Irving didn't stay in one place for long, and they certainly didn't look twice at women with twisted feet and no prospects. One evening, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and purple across the Arizona sky, Clara was gathering eggs when she heard the bunkhouse door open. Zach emerged, freshly washed, his dark hair still damp. He'd trimmed his beard and put on a clean shirt, though it was as worn as the rest of his clothing. "Evening, Clara," he called, walking toward her. "Need any help with those eggs? I think I can manage," she replied with a small smile, holding up her half-filled basket. "You look nice." "Going into town," he nodded. "Thought I'd get a drink at the saloon, maybe play a hand or two of cards. Would you? Would you care to join me?" Clara nearly dropped the basket. "Join you at the saloon." "Well, not the saloon exactly," he amended quickly. "There's a social at the church tonight. Heard some of the ladies talking about it when I was in town yesterday. Thought maybe you'd like to go." Her heart pounded uncomfortably in her chest. Was he asking her to accompany him socially? Or was this just kindness, pity for the farm girl who never went anywhere? I don't really go to town much," she said carefully. "Any particular reason?" he asked, his gray eyes studying her face. Clara looked down at her worn boots, one modified to accommodate her misshapen foot. "People stare," she said simply. Understanding dawned in his eyes, but instead of pity, she saw something that looked remarkably like anger flash across his face. "Let them stare," he said firmly. "Anyone who'd judge a person by how they walk instead of who they are isn't worth a second thought." His words warmed something inside her that had been cold for a very long time. Still, years of her father's warnings rang in her ears. "My pa wouldn't approve." "Your pa already went to bed with a bottle of whiskey," Zach pointed out. "And your ma told me to make sure you had a good time." Clara's eyes widened. "You asked my mother's permission." He ducked his head, suddenly looking boyish despite the weathered face. "Seemed like the proper thing to do. She said it's high time you got out and enjoyed yourself." The thought of attending a social, of walking into town on Zachariah Irving's arm, was both thrilling and terrifying. People would talk. They always did. But looking at Zach's hopeful expression, Clara made a decision she hoped she wouldn't regret. "Let me change my dress." 20 minutes later, wearing her best and only good dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had made for her last Christmas, Clara met Zach outside. He'd hitched up the family's old wagon and stood waiting beside it, hat in hand. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. The ride into Wickenburg was filled with easy conversation. Zach told her stories of his travels across Texas and New Mexico, of cattle drives and small towns not unlike theirs. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in years, the tension in her shoulders easing with every mile. As they approached the town, however, her anxiety returned. Wickenburg wasn't large, just a main street with the usual businesses. General store, blacksmith, saloon, hotel, and church, but it held a lifetime of painful memories for Clara. "We don't have to stay long," Zach said quietly, sensing her discomfort. "Just one dance, maybe some pie, and we'll head back if you want." His understanding gave her courage. "No, it's all right. I'm glad to be here with you." The church was lit up with lanterns, the sounds of a fiddle and piano spilling out into the night. Several wagons and horses were already hitched outside, and through the windows, Clara could see people dancing. Zach helped her down from the wagon, his strong hands encircling her waist momentarily before setting her gently on the ground. The brief contact sent a flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with nervousness. "Ready," he asked, offering his arm. She nodded, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. Ready. The moment they entered, Clara felt eyes turn toward them. Conversation faltered briefly before resuming, now with an undercurrent of whispers. She recognized most of the faces the Wilkins family who ran the general store, Dr. Harrison and his wife, the Petersons from the neighboring farm, and many others she'd known all her life but rarely spoke to. "Clara Tucker," Mrs. Wilkins exclaimed, hurrying over. "What a lovely surprise. We never see you at our socials." "Good evening, Mrs. Wilkins," Clara replied politely. "You remember our new hired hand, Mr. Irving, of course, the handsome cowboy." The older woman beamed at Zach. "How nice of you to escort Clara. She doesn't get out nearly enough." Before Clara could feel the sting of the backhanded compliment, Zach smoothly intervened. "I'm the fortunate one, madam. Miss Tucker was kind enough to accept my invitation." Mrs. Wilkins's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she recovered quickly. "Well, there's punch over there, and the ladies have outdone themselves with pies and cakes. Do enjoy yourselves." As they moved deeper into the room, Clara caught snippets of conversation around them. "Never thought she'd find a beau with that foot of hers. Must feel sorry for her. Won't last. Mark my words." Clara's cheeks burned, but Zach seemed not to hear or was choosing to ignore the comments. Instead, he guided her toward the refreshments table, greeting people with a friendly nod as they passed. "Don't let them get to you," he murmured close to her ear. "Small towns run on gossip, but it blows over quick as a summer storm." "Not when you've been the subject of it your whole life," she replied quietly. He squeezed her hand gently. "Then let's give them something new to talk about." Before she could ask what he meant, Zach was leading her toward the center of the room where several couples were dancing to a lively tune. Clara balked, pulling back slightly. "Zach, I can't. Everyone can dance," he said with confidence. "Some just do it differently than others. Trust me." There was something in his gray eyes that made her want to believe him, to trust that he wouldn't let her embarrass herself. Slowly, she nodded. Zach smiled, placing one hand at her waist and taking her other in his. "Follow my lead. It's just like a conversation, only with feet instead of words." And somehow, it worked. Zach moved with such natural grace that he made up for her awkwardness, guiding her through the steps in a way that minimized her limp. When she occasionally faltered, he simply adjusted, making it seem intentional rather than a mistake. After the initial stiffness left her body, Clara found herself actually enjoying the dance. Zach kept her laughing with quiet observations about the other dancers, and his steady presence made her feel safe in a way she hadn't experienced before. When the music shifted to a slower waltz, Zach drew her slightly closer. "Is this all right?" he asked, his voice low. Clara nodded, unable to find words as his hand pressed more firmly against the small of her back. They moved together in small circles, and Clara became aware of every place their bodies connected, his hand in hers, his other hand at her waist, the occasional brush of his chest against hers. "You're staring," she whispered, noticing his intense gaze. "Can't help it," he replied simply. "You're something to behold when you smile, Clara Tucker." The honesty in his voice took her breath away. No one had ever looked at her the way Zach was looking at her now, like she was something precious, something worth seeing. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Zach's brow furrowed slightly. "It's not kindness, Clara, it's—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "When I rode into your farm that day, I wasn't planning to stay. I was just passing through, looking for a few days' work before moving on. But then I saw you standing there on that porch, and something told me I needed to stay a while longer." "Because you pitied me," she said, the old insecurity rising up. He shook his head firmly. Because I recognized something in you, a strength that matched the sadness in your eyes. I wanted to know the woman who could carry both those things and still stand tall. Clara's throat tightened with emotion. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just dance with me a while longer. And she did, losing track of time as they moved together in the warm, lantern-lit church. For once, Clara forgot about the whispers, forgot about her foot, forgot about everything except the way Zach's eyes crinkled when he smiled down at her. The spell was broken when a sharp voice cut through her contentment. Well, if it isn't Clara Tucker. Dancing, of all things. Clara stiffened, recognizing Nancy Peterson, the daughter of neighboring farmers and her childhood tormentor. Nancy, beautiful and perfect in every way Clara was not, stood at the edge of the dance floor with her husband of 2 years, watching them with ill-disguised mockery. "Hello, Nancy," Clara said evenly. "Lovely to see you." Nancy's gaze traveled from Clara to Zach, her expression shifting to one of calculated interest. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend, Zachariah Irving?" Zach said before Clara could speak, not releasing her from their dance position. "I work for the Tuckers." "Oh." Nancy's eyes widened with understanding. "I see. How kind of you to bring poor Clara to the social." The implication was clear. Only charity would explain Zach's attention to Clara. Before Clara could feel the sting of the words, Zach surprised her. "Actually, madam," he said with a politeness that barely concealed steel beneath, "I had to convince Miss Tucker to accompany me. She's doing me the favor." He smiled down at Clara with such genuine warmth that her heart stuttered. "I'm the lucky one tonight." Nancy's smile froze, her eyes narrowing slightly. "How nice. Well, enjoy yourselves." As Nancy and her husband walked away, Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you for that." Zach's expression was serious now. "I only spoke the truth, Clara. I am the lucky one." For the first time in her life, Clara allowed herself to believe that someone might actually see her, all of her, and find her worthy. The ride home was quieter than the journey into town, but it was a comfortable silence filled with shared glances and small smiles. The night air was cool, the stars brilliant overhead, and Clara felt a lightness in her heart that was entirely new. When they reached the farm, Zach helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I had a wonderful time tonight," Clara said softly. "Thank you for asking me. I'd like to take you again," he replied. "Maybe to the Harvest Festival next month if you'd allow it." The implication that he planned to stay at least that long sent a thrill through her. "I'd like that very much." They stood facing each other in the silver moonlight, neither seeming eager to end the evening. Zach took a step closer, his expression suddenly serious. "Clara, what in tarnation is going on out here?" They jumped apart as Mason Tucker's angry voice cut through the night. He stood on the porch, silhouetted against the light from the open door, shotgun in hand. "Evening, Mr. Tucker," Zach said calmly, though Clara could see tension in his shoulders. "I was just bringing Clara home from the church social." "Church social," Mason spat. "Since when do you go gallivanting around town, girl? Get inside now." Clara's perfect evening shattered around her. The magical feeling of being normal, of being wanted, evaporated in the face of her father's anger. "Pa, please, now, Clara." He raised the shotgun slightly, not pointing it directly at them but making his threat clear. "Sir," Zach began, stepping forward. "There's no need for you stay out of this," Mason growled. "I hired you to work my land, not to court my daughter. You try anything like this again and you'll be looking for new employment." "Understood." Clara wanted to protest, to stand her ground, but years of submission held her in place. With an apologetic glance at Zach, she moved toward the house. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she whispered as she passed him. Zach's expression was unreadable, but he nodded slightly. "Good night, Clara." She felt her father's disapproving glare follow her up the porch steps and into the house. Inside, her mother waited, face lined with worry. "Clara, are you all right?" Elena asked once the door closed behind them. "I'm fine, Ma." Clara tried to keep the tremor from her voice. "We just went to the social." "I know, dear. I told him to take you." Elena glanced nervously toward the door where Mason's voice could still be heard berating Zach. "Your father, he's afraid for you." Clara gave a bitter laugh. "He's not afraid for me, Ma. He's afraid of losing his unpaid help." "That's not fair," her mother protested, but without conviction. They both knew there was truth to Clara's words. "I'm going to bed," Clara said, suddenly exhausted. The joy of the evening had been replaced by a familiar ache of disappointment. "Good night, Ma." In her small bedroom, Clara carefully removed her blue dress and hung it up, running her fingers over the fabric that still seemed to hold the memory of Zach's hand at her waist. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the sounds of her father returning to the house, grumbling about ungrateful daughters and drifters with wandering hands. Later, when the house was quiet and dark, Clara slipped out of bed and moved to her window. From here, she could just make out the bunkhouse, where a single lantern still burned. She wondered what Zach was thinking, if he regretted asking her to the social, if he was even now packing his things to leave at first light. The thought of him leaving made her heart constrict painfully. In just a week, he had brought something into her life that had been missing for as long as she could remember hope. With a sigh, she returned to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, Clara rose early, half afraid that Zach would be gone. To her relief, when she stepped outside to feed the chickens, she saw him already at work in the barn, forking hay into the stalls as if nothing had happened. When he spotted her, he set down his pitchfork and walked over, his expression cautious but determined. "Morning, Clara," he said, removing his hat. "I wanted to apologize for last night. I shouldn't have put you in that position with your father." Clara shook her head quickly. "You have nothing to apologize for. It was the most wonderful night I've had in, well, ever." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "For me too." They stood in silence for a moment, the morning sun casting long shadows across the farmyard. "Your pa made himself clear," Zach finally said. "He doesn't want me spending time with you outside of work." Clara's heart sank. "I understand if you want to leave. He can be difficult." "Leave?" Zach looked genuinely surprised. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara, not unless you want me to." "But my father, your father hired me to work, and I intend to do just that," he said firmly. "As for the rest—" He glanced around to make sure they were alone, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I respect your father's position as head of this household, but I'm not giving up so easily. Not on you." The intensity in his gray eyes made Clara's breath catch. "What are you saying, Zach?" "I'm saying that I've traveled from Texas to California and back again, and I've never met anyone like you, Clara Tucker. I'm saying that I aim to court you properly, with or without your father's blessing, though I'd certainly prefer the former." Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Men didn't court women like her. They certainly didn't defy fathers for the privilege. "Why?" she whispered, needing to understand. "Why me?" Zach's expression softened. "Because when I look at you, I see someone strong enough to bear what life's thrown at her without becoming bitter. Someone kind enough to welcome a stranger into her home. Someone beautiful enough to take my breath away when she smiles." His words washed over her like warm rain, seeping into cracks she hadn't known existed in her heart. "My pa will never approve," she said, though she desperately wanted to believe otherwise. "Then we'll just have to change his mind, won't we?" Zach replied with a confidence that Clara envied. I can be very persuasive when I set my mind to something." Before she could respond, the sound of the back door slamming announced her father's approach. Zach stepped back to a respectable distance, but not before giving her a quick wink that promised this conversation wasn't over. The next few weeks settled into a strange pattern. During the day, Zach worked diligently alongside Mason, slowly earning the older man's grudging respect with his knowledge of farming and cattle. He was unfailingly polite to Clara in her father's presence, maintaining a careful distance that gave Mason no reason to complain. But there were moments, brief, stolen moments, when they found themselves alone. A shared glance across the dinner table, a brush of hands as Clara passed him tools in the barn. Once, when her father rode into town for supplies, Zach helped Clara hang laundry, making her laugh with stories of his misadventures across the West. In those moments, Clara felt herself falling deeper into something she'd never dared hope for. She learned that Zach had grown up on a small ranch in East Texas, that he had 3 older sisters who had doted on their baby brother, that he'd left home at 17 after his parents died of fever within months of each other. "I was angry," he admitted one afternoon as they repaired chicken wire together, her father's snores audible from the house where he napped. "Angry at God, angry at the world, so I rode west and never looked back." "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked. "Leaving, I mean." Zach considered this, his strong hands pausing in their work. "I regret not saying a proper goodbye to my sisters. We write now and then, but it's not the same. But the traveling itself," he shook his head. "No, I don't regret that. It made me who I am, and it led me here to you." The simple statement made Clara's heart swell. No matter what happened, she would always have these quiet moments when Zachariah Irving looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever seen. As summer faded into fall, the air grew cooler, and the landscape around Wickenburg transformed into shades of gold and brown. The harvest kept them all busy from dawn until dusk, but Clara had never felt so alive. Even her father seemed less harsh, grudgingly acknowledging that with Zach's help, they'd had the best yield in years. One crisp October morning, Clara was in the kitchen helping her mother prepare breakfast when they heard raised voices from outside. Alarmed, they hurried to the window to see Mason and Zach in what appeared to be a heated discussion near the corral. "What on earth?" Elena murmured, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll go see," Clara said, already moving toward the door. Outside, the autumn air carried their voices clearly. "Absolutely not," Mason was saying, his face flushed with anger. "She's not going anywhere with you, and that's final." Zach stood his ground, his expression determined but respectful. "Sir, it's just the harvest festival. The whole town will be there." "I'm only asking to escort Clara, the same as any gentleman might." "You're not a gentleman," Mason sneered. "You're a drifter who happened to blow in when I needed help. Come spring, you'll be gone like all the rest, leaving her with notions in her head and nothing to show for it." Clara stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "That's enough, Pa." Both men turned to look at her, surprise evident on their faces. "Go back inside, Clara," her father ordered. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me more than anyone," she replied, a new steadiness in her voice. "Mr. Irving asked to escort me to the Harvest Festival, and I'd like to accept his invitation." Mason's eyes narrowed. "I forbid it. You're not parading that foot of yours around town, making a spectacle of yourself." The words hurt as they always did, but this time Clara refused to let them defeat her. "I went to the church social last month and the world didn't end. In fact, I had a wonderful time. And gave the whole town something to gossip about," Mason shot back. Nancy Peterson's mother was in the general store telling everyone how that poor Tucker girl had to get a hired hand to take pity on her. Clara flinched, but Zach stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "That's not true, and you know it. I asked Clara because I wanted her company, not out of pity, and anyone who says otherwise isn't worth listening to." "Easy for you to say," Mason growled. "You don't have to live here after you've moved on. What if I don't move on?" Zach's question hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Mason stared at him. "What are you saying, boy?" Zach straightened, meeting the older man's gaze steadily. "I'm saying that my intentions toward your daughter are honorable, Mr. Tucker. I'm saying that if Clara will have me, I'd like to court her properly, with your blessing." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Though they had spoken of such things in private moments, hearing Zach declare his intentions so openly to her father no less made it suddenly, wonderfully real. Mason's face darkened. "You can't be serious. A man like you settling down with a—" He cut himself off, but the unspoken words hung in the air. "With a what, Pa?" Clara asked quietly. "A cripple, is that what you were going to say?" Her father had the grace to look ashamed, but his stubbornness remained. "You don't know anything about him, Clara, where he comes from, what he's done." "I know enough," she replied. "I know he's kind and hardworking. I know he looks at me and sees me, not just my foot. That's more than most people in this town have ever done." For a moment, Mason seemed at a loss for words. Then his expression hardened again. "My answer is no. To both the festival and the courting. Now get back to your chores, both of you. This conversation is over." He stalked off toward the fields, leaving Clara and Zach standing alone by the corral. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered once her father was out of earshot. "He's always been protective, but this is—" "He's afraid," Zach said, surprising her. "Afraid of losing you, afraid of you getting hurt." "Or afraid of losing his free labor," Clara added bitterly. Zach moved closer, taking her hand in his work-roughened one. "Clara, I meant what I said. I want to court you properly and honorably. I know I don't have much to offer, no land of my own, no fortune, but I swear to you, what I feel for you is real." Clara looked up into his gray eyes, so full of sincerity and something deeper that made her heart race. "I believe you, Zach, but what can we do? My father won't change his mind." A slow smile spread across Zach's face, the kind that always made her stomach flutter. "I told you I can be very persuasive when I set my mind to something. Your father may be stubborn, but so am I. I'm not giving up, Clara, not on you, not ever." His confidence gave her strength. "The Harvest Festival is this Saturday. I'd still like to go if you're willing to risk my father's wrath." Zach grinned. "For you, I'd risk far more than that." His expression grew serious again. "But I won't do anything that puts you in a difficult position with your family. This is your home." Clara thought about the farmhouse that had always felt more like a cage than a home, about the years spent watching life from windows rather than living it, about the letters to potential husbands that her father had sabotaged because he couldn't imagine anyone wanting a daughter with a twisted foot. Then she thought about the way Zach looked at her, like she was whole, like she was enough. "Home is where you're valued for who you are," she said softly. "I'm beginning to think maybe I haven't found mine yet." Zach's eyes widened slightly, understanding the weight of her words. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then we'll find it together." The promise in those simple words sustained Clara through the next few days of her father's sullen silence, and pointed remarks about ungrateful daughters and men with smooth talk and empty pockets. Her mother tried to mediate, but even Alina's gentle influence could not sway Mason Tucker once his mind was set. On Saturday morning, Clara awoke early, her stomach tight with anticipation and anxiety. She had not mentioned the festival again, but in her heart, she had already decided. Today, she would choose her own path for the first time in her life. She dressed carefully in her blue dress, the same one she'd worn to the church social, and spent extra time arranging her hair in a simple but flattering style. When she emerged from her bedroom, her mother was waiting in the hallway, a small bundle in her hands. "Clara," Eleanor said softly, glancing nervously toward the front of the house where Mason was reading the newspaper. "I want you to have this." She handed Clara the bundle, which turned out to be a beautiful knitted shawl in shades of cream and pale blue. "I made it for you last winter but never found the right occasion. I think today might be it." Clara stared at her mother in surprise. "How did you know?" Eleanor smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling. "A mother knows her daughter, and I've seen the way you look at that young man, the same way I once looked at your father before." She trailed off, a shadow crossing her face. "Life can be hard, Clara. When you find someone who sees the real you, who makes you feel like more instead of less, you hold on to them." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes. "Pa will be furious." "Let me worry about your father," Eleanor said with unexpected firmness. "You deserve a chance at happiness, Clara. All I've ever wanted was for you to be loved for exactly who you are." Clara embraced her mother tightly, burying her face in Eleanor's shoulder as she had as a child. "Thank you, Ma. Now go," Eleanor whispered, pressing a kiss to Clara's forehead. "Mr. Irving is waiting by the old oak tree at the end of the lane. I told him to meet you there at 10. Clara pulled back, stunned. "You spoke to Zach?" Her mother's eyes twinkled with mischief Clara hadn't seen in years. "I may be quiet, but I'm not blind. Now hurry, before your father notices you're dressed for town." Heart pounding, Clara slipped out the back door and made her way down the lane toward the massive oak that marked the boundary of their property. Sure enough, Zach was waiting, looking more handsome than ever in a clean shirt and his best pair of trousers, his dark hair slicked back under his hat. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her breath catch. "You came," he said simply, as if her arrival was a gift he hadn't dared hope for. "Did you doubt I would?" she asked, returning his smile. "Not for a second," he replied, offering his arm. "Your mother arranged for us to borrow the Wilkins wagon. It's just over the rise." As they walked together, Clara marveled at the conspiracy her quiet, obedient mother had orchestrated. "I can't believe Ma did all this." Zach chuckled. "Mrs. Tucker is quite formidable when she puts her mind to something. Must be where you get your strength from." "I'm not strong," Clara protested. "I've spent my whole life doing what I was told, afraid to want more." "Until now," Zach pointed out, helping her into the waiting wagon. "That takes courage, Clara, more courage than most people ever show." The Harvest Festival was in full swing by the time they reached town. Wickenburg's Main Street had been transformed with colorful bunting and stalls selling everything from fresh pies to handcrafted items. Children ran laughing between displays, and a small band played cheerful tunes near the town square. As before, Clara felt eyes turn toward them as they walked through the crowd. But this time, she held her head high, Zach's steady presence beside her giving her confidence. They sampled apple cider and admired the harvest displays, and when the dancing started, Zach led her into the circle without hesitation. "Everyone's watching," Clara murmured as they joined the other couples. "Let them," Zach replied, his hand warm at her waist. "Let them see how beautiful you are when you smile." And for once, Clara didn't care about the whispers or the stares. She danced and laughed, and when Zach pulled her close during a slow waltz, she felt a happiness so complete it almost hurt. "I want to show you something," he said as the afternoon waned. "Will you come with me?" Intrigued, Clara nodded, and Zach led her away from the festival toward the edge of town where the desert stretched out in golden waves toward distant mountains. "Where are we going?" she asked as they walked along a narrow path that wound through sagebrush and cacti. Just a little farther, he promised, helping her over a rocky patch. I found this place a few weeks ago, been waiting for the right moment to share it with you. They crested a small hill, and Clara gasped. Below them lay a hidden valley, surprisingly green amid the arid landscape. A small stream trickled through it, feeding a grove of cottonwood trees whose leaves had turned bright gold in the autumn sun. Wildflowers dotted the grassy area, and the setting sun cast the whole scene in a warm, golden light. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the unexpected oasis. "It reminded me of you," Zach said softly. "Something precious hidden away where most people never bother to look." He led her down into the valley to a flat rock beside the stream, where they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Clara," Zach began, turning to face her, "there's something I need to tell you, something about my past." The seriousness in his tone made her heart skip a beat. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, removing his hat and setting it aside. "When I told you I left Texas after my parents died, that was true, but I didn't tell you everything." Clara waited, a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "My father wasn't just a rancher," Zach continued. "He was also the sheriff of our county, a good man, respected by everyone. When he and my mother died, I was angry like I told you, but more than that, I was lost." He looked down at his hands, flexing them slowly. "There was a man in town, Dexter Harding, who ran the saloon. He'd always had run-ins with my father, but after Pa died, Harding started causing real trouble, taking advantage of people, cheating at cards, roughing up anyone who complained." Zach's jaw tightened at the memory. "One night, he beat a young man half to death over a debt. I confronted him, told him my father wouldn't have stood for it. He laughed in my face, said my father was dead and buried and couldn't help anyone now." Clara could see where this was heading, her heart aching for the young man Zach had been, grieving and alone. "I hit him," Zach said simply. "Hit him hard. He pulled a knife and I pulled my father's gun." Clara's breath caught. "I didn't kill him," Zach added quickly. "But I shot him in the shoulder, in front of half the town." "What happened then?" Clara asked softly. "The new sheriff, a friend of my father's, told me to leave town. Said Harding had friends in high places who'd see me hang if I stayed, justified or not, so I left that night. Been drifting ever since, never staying in one place long enough for my past to catch up with me." He finally looked up, meeting her eyes with a mixture of apprehension and determination. "I'm not proud of what I did, Clara, but I wanted you to know the truth about me before I ask you what I brought you here to ask." Clara reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Thank you for telling me. It doesn't change how I feel about you, Zach." Relief washed over his features. "You're the first person I've told, the only person who knows the real reason I keep moving." "And is that why you came to Wickenburg?" she asked. "Just passing through on your way to somewhere else?" He shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "I thought so at first, but then I met you and suddenly the idea of moving on didn't seem so important anymore." Heart pounding, Clara watched as Zach shifted to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Clara Tucker," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I know I have no right to ask this. I have no fortune, no land of my own. I can't offer you the life you deserve. But I can offer you my heart, completely and without reservation. I can promise to see you, all of you, every day for the rest of our lives." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small, simple ring with a single turquoise stone. "I bought this in town last week," he explained, holding it between them. "It's not fancy, but neither are we. Clara, if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you, wherever that might be." Clara stared at the ring, Then at the man holding it, this kind, strong man who had walked into her life and changed everything. A man who saw beyond her twisted foot to the woman she truly was. "Are you asking me to marry you, Zachariah Irving?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the desert. "I am. I choose you, Clara. I choose you every time in this life or any other." The words echoed in her heart, filling spaces she hadn't known were empty. All her life, people had told her she'd never be chosen, not as a friend, not as a wife, not as anything but a burden to be pitied. Yet here was this man, offering her everything she'd been told she couldn't have. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Yes, Zach, I'll marry you." His face lit with such joy that Clara felt her own happiness multiply. He slipped the ring onto her finger, it fit perfectly, and then cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with such tenderness that she thought her heart might burst. "May I kiss you, Clara Tucker?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Zach leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a gentle, reverent kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. His hands were gentle on her face, and when he pulled back, his eyes shone with unshed tears. "I love you," he said simply. "Have since the moment I saw you standing on that porch, looking at me like I might be trouble." Clara laughed through her own tears. "You are trouble, Zachariah Irving, the very best kind." They stayed in their hidden valley until the stars came out, talking about the future, planning a life neither had dared to imagine before. When they finally returned to town to retrieve the wagon, the festival had wound down, lanterns glowing softly in the gathering darkness. "Are you ready to face your father?" Zach asked as they drove toward the Tucker farm. Clara touched the ring on her finger, drawing strength from its solid presence. "I am. Whatever happens, we face it together." The farm was dark when they arrived, but as they approached the house, the front door opened, spilling lamplight onto the porch. Clara Tucker stood waiting, her face tense with worry. "Clara," she called softly, "your father's been out looking for you. He's not happy." Clara squeezed Zach's hand before descending from the wagon. "It's all right, Ma. We're ready." Eleanor's gaze dropped to their joined hands, then to the ring glinting on Clara's finger. Her eyes widened, but before she could speak, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them all turn. Mason Tucker rode into the yard, his face thunderous in the lamplight. He dismounted quickly, striding toward them with anger in every line of his body. "Where have you been?" he demanded, glaring at Clara. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "The whole town's talking about you running off with this drifter." "We went to the harvest festival, Pa," Clara replied calmly. "And then Zach asked me to marry him. I said yes." The bluntness of her statement seemed to take Mason aback. He stared at her, then at Zach, his mouth working soundlessly for a moment. "Have you lost your mind?" he finally spluttered. "Marry him? You barely know him." "I know him better than you think," Clara said, "and he knows me, the real me. Not just the girl with the twisted foot who needs looking after." "This is madness," Mason declared, turning his attention to Zach. "What kind of game are you playing, boy? You think you can waltz in here, charm my daughter, and what? Take her away from her family? Or maybe you're after our land, is that it?" Zach stood his ground, his expression steady. "No, sir. I'm not after anything except Clara's happiness. If that's with me, then I'm the luckiest man alive. If not, I'll respect her decision. But I love your daughter, Mr. Tucker." "That's the simple truth." "Love," Mason scoffed. "What do you know about love, about commitment? You're a drifter, here today, gone tomorrow." "Not anymore," Zach replied. "I'm staying if Clara will have me. If you'll let me earn your respect, I'll work this land beside you for as long as you need. If not, I'll find us a place of our own, but I won't leave her unless she asks me to." Clara moved to stand beside Zach, taking his hand in hers. "I'm not asking, Pa, I'm telling you. I'm going to marry Zach. With or without your blessing." Mason's face darkened further, but before he could respond, Elena stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on her husband's arm. "Mason," she said quietly, "look at your daughter, really look at her." Something in her mother's voice must have reached him, because Mason's angry gaze shifted to Clara's face. For perhaps the first time in years, he seemed to truly see her, not just her disability, but the woman she had become. "She's happy," Elena continued softly. "Happier than I've ever seen her. Isn't that what we've always wanted for our daughter? But he's—" Mason began, then faltered, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "He has nothing to offer her." "He has everything to offer her," Elena corrected gently. "Respect, understanding, love. The chance to be seen for who she truly is." Clara watched her father's face, seeing the conflict there, the struggle between his protective instincts and the evidence before his eyes. "Pa," she said softly, "all my life, you've told me no one would ever choose me. That I should accept my place and be grateful for it. But Zach did choose me. He sees past what you've always focused on. He sees me." Mason looked from Clara to Zach, then to the ring on his daughter's finger. His shoulders slumped slightly, the anger giving way to something that looked almost like resignation. "You really love her?" he asked Zach directly. "With all my heart," Zach replied without hesitation. "I'll spend my life proving it if you'll give me the chance." For a long moment, Mason was silent, looking at the young couple standing before him, united in their resolve. Then, to Clara's astonishment, he nodded slowly. "Elena's right," he admitted gruffly. "I've never seen you look like this, Clara, like you believe in yourself." "I do, Pa," Clara said softly, "because Zach believes in me." Mason cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion of the moment. "Well, I suppose we'd better start planning a wedding then. Can't have my daughter living in sin, can I?" It wasn't quite a blessing, but it was as close as Mason Tucker was likely to come. Clara felt tears of relief spring to her eyes as she rushed forward to embrace her father for the first time in years. "Thank you, Pa," she whispered against his shoulder. He patted her back awkwardly. "Don't thank me yet. I'm still expecting this young man to prove himself." "I look forward to it, sir," Zach said, extending his hand to Mason. After a moment's hesitation, Mason accepted the handshake. "You hurt her. There's nowhere in this territory you can hide from me. Understood?" "Perfectly, sir," Zach replied with a smile. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Word of Clara's engagement spread through Wickenburg like wildfire, generating reactions that ranged from genuine congratulations to poorly concealed surprise. Clara found she no longer cared what people thought. With Zach beside her and her mother's unwavering support, she felt stronger than she ever had before. They decided on a small wedding in December, after the harvest was complete and before winter set in fully. Elena threw herself into preparations with unexpected energy, sewing Clara a simple but beautiful wedding dress of cream-colored silk that she'd been saving for years. Mason, true to his word, watched Zach like a hawk, testing him with increasingly difficult tasks around the farm. To his grudging admiration, the younger man met every challenge, working from dawn until dusk without complaint. Gradually, a tentative respect developed between the two men. Clara often caught them deep in conversation about crop rotation or cattle breeding, her father actually listening to Zach's ideas rather than dismissing them outright. "He's coming around," Zach told her one evening as they sat on the porch swing, enjoying a rare moment alone. "Said my idea for irrigating the south field might actually work." Clara laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "From Pa, that's practically a declaration of love." Zach's arm tightened around her. Speaking of love, have you thought about where you want to live after the wedding? Your parents have offered us the East Room until spring, but you're wondering if I'd rather start fresh somewhere else, Clara finished for him. Away from the whispers and the stares. He nodded, his expression serious in the fading light. I want you to be happy, Clara. If that means staying here, working this land with your father, then that's what we'll do. But if you want more a place of our own, a fresh start, we can have that too. Clara considered his words carefully. For most of her life, the Tucker farm had been both haven and prison, a place where she was protected from the world's cruelty, but also isolated from its joys. What about your sisters in Texas? She asked. Have you written to tell them about us? Zach smiled. I have. Got a letter back just yesterday. They're thrilled, especially Sarah, the oldest. Says she's been praying for years that I'd find someone to settle down with. Do you miss them? Clara asked softly. Every day, he admitted. But the man who left Texas, that angry boy with his father's gun, he couldn't have gone back even if he'd wanted to. Now, though. He looked down at her, his eyes full of possibilities. Now I have you, and maybe it's time to stop running. Clara's heart swelled with love for this man who had wandered into her life and changed everything. What if we did both? She suggested. Stay here through spring, help Pa with planting. Then maybe we could visit your sisters, see if Texas feels like somewhere we could build a life. The hope that bloomed on Zach's face told her she'd guessed right. You do that. Leave everything you know, Clara smiled, touching his cheek gently. Zach, before you came, all I had was a place where I was tolerated, not cherished. You've shown me what it feels like to be valued for who I am. Wherever we go from here, as long as we're together, I'll be home. He kissed her then, a deep, lingering kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, Clara rested her forehead against his, breathing in the scent that had become so dear to her, leather and sunshine and something uniquely Zach. 1 month, he murmured. 1 month and you'll be Clara Irving, Mrs. Zachariah Irving, she replied, savoring the sound of it. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Their wedding day dawned clear and cold, the December sun casting long shadows across the frost-covered ground. Clara stood in her bedroom, her mother fastening the last buttons on her wedding dress, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. You look beautiful, sweetheart, Eleanor said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Like an angel. Clara turned to the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. The cream silk dress hugged her slender figure before flowing gracefully to the floor, hiding her twisted foot but not defining her by it. Her dark hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with small white flowers from Mrs. Wilkins's hothouse. But it was her eyes that surprised her, most bright, clear, and filled with a confidence she'd never possessed before. This was not the same Clara who had stood on the porch 5 months ago, watching her father shoot her letters of introduction. This was a woman chosen, cherished, and about to begin a new life with the man she loved. I can't believe this is really happening, she whispered. Believe it, her mother replied, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from the dress. You deserve every happiness, Clara. I've always known that, even when. She paused, her expression growing wistful. Even when your father and I couldn't see past our fears for you. Clara embraced her mother tightly. Thank you, Ma, for everything. A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara, Mason's voice called. It's time, girl. Clara opened the door to find her father standing awkwardly in his Sunday best, his usual work-roughened appearance softened by a fresh haircut and a clean-shaven face. He stared at her for a long moment, something like wonder crossing his features. Well now, he said gruffly. Don't you look a picture? Thank you, Pa, Clara replied, detecting the emotion he was trying to hide. Mason cleared his throat. "That young man of yours is waiting, pacing a hole in Mrs. Wilkins's parlor floor, if you ask me." The Wilkins had offered their home for the ceremony, its spacious front room more suitable for guests than the Tucker farmhouse. Though they'd planned a small wedding, it seemed half of Wickenburg had found reason to attend, curious to witness the unlikely match between Clara Tucker and the handsome stranger who had ridden into town. As Clara took her father's arm, preparing to leave her childhood bedroom for the last time as an unmarried woman, he surprised her by covering her hand with his own. "I was wrong, Clara," he said quietly. "What I said all those years about no one choosing you. I was trying to protect you in my own foolish way, but I was wrong and I'm sorry for it." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes. In all her 22 years, she had never heard her father apologize for anything. "It's all right, Pa," he shook his head firmly. "No, it ain't all right. I should have seen you the way that boy sees you, strong and kind and worth choosing. I should have been the first one to tell you so, not the last." Clara squeezed his arm, too moved for words. Together, they made their way downstairs and into the waiting wagon that would take them to the Wilkins house. The parlor was transformed with evergreen boughs and white ribbons, the scent of pine filling the air. Familiar faces turned to watch as Clara entered on her father's arm. Mrs. Wilkins beaming proudly, Dr. Harrison and his wife, even Nancy Peterson and her husband, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and grudging respect. But Clara saw none of them. Her eyes were fixed on Zach, standing before the minister in his new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his gray eyes finding hers across the room with such love that she nearly stumbled. The walk down the makeshift aisle seemed both endless and over in an instant. Then her father was placing her hand in Zach's, his gruff, "Take care of her," answered by Zach's solemn, "With my life, sir." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Clara heard herself repeating vows, felt the cool metal of a wedding band sliding onto her finger to join her engagement ring, saw the minister's kind smile as he pronounced them husband and wife. And then Zach was kissing her, a gentle, reverent kiss that sealed their promises to each other. When they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Zachariah Irving, Clara felt a lightness in her heart that she had never known before. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Mrs. Wilkins had outdone herself with a feast that would be talked about for months, and someone had brought a fiddle, filling the house with music that soon had everyone dancing. To Clara's surprise, even her father joined in, leading Alina in a careful waltz that spoke of years of partnership, of a love that had weathered hardships and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least intact. As the evening waned, Clara found herself standing by the window, watching snowflakes begin to fall gently outside. Zach appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist with the easy familiarity of a husband. "Happy, Mrs. Irving?" he asked, his voice warm in her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into him. Across the room, Clara caught sight of Nancy Peterson watching them, her expression thoughtful. When their eyes met, Nancy gave a small, almost apologetic nod before turning away. "Seems you've changed some minds in this town," Zach observed, following her gaze. Clara smiled. "Maybe, or maybe they're just starting to see what you saw all along." "And what's that?" he asked, turning her to face him. "That being different doesn't make you less," she said softly. "It just makes you uniquely yourself." Zach's eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when he was deeply moved. "That's exactly right, Clara Irving, and I wouldn't change a single thing about you." Later, as they made their way back to the Tucker farm in the wagon, Zach, had borrowed now their temporary home until spring. Clara watched the snowflakes dance in the moonlight, each one unique, each one perfect in its own way. "What are you thinking about?" Zach asked, his arm secure around her shoulders. "About how sometimes the things we think are burdens turn out to be blessings," she replied. "If I hadn't been born with this foot, my father might have married me off years ago to someone who saw me as nothing more than a farmer's daughter. I might never have been here when you rode in that day." Zach considered this, his breath forming clouds in the cold night air. "Maybe that's true, or maybe we would have found each other anyway. I like to think some things are meant to be, no matter the path we take to get there." Clara rested her head against his shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible. "I like that thought, that no matter what you would have found me, would have chosen me." "Every time, Clara," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'd choose you every time." 5 years later, Clara stood on the porch of their small ranch house, watching as Zach led their 3-year-old son Thomas on his first pony ride around the corral. The little boy's delighted laughter carried across the Texas morning, mingling with the songs of meadowlarks in the nearby field. "Mama, look," Thomas called, waving one hand while the other clutched the saddle horn. "I'm riding like Papa. I see you, sweetheart," Clara called back, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their second child grew. "You're doing wonderfully." Zach caught her eye over their son's head, his smile as full of love as it had been the day they wed. 5 years of marriage had only deepened the bond between them, each challenge faced together making them stronger. The move to Texas had been the right choice. Zach's sisters had welcomed Clara with open arms, and the small piece of land they'd purchased near the Irving family homestead had flourished under their care. They raised horses, now Zach's true passion, and had earned a reputation for quality stock that brought buyers from as far away as Kansas City. Clara's parents had visited twice, their relationship healing a little more each time. Mason Tucker had even held his grandson with tears in his eyes, though he'd blamed them on the Texas dust. As Zach lifted Thomas from the pony and set him on the ground, the boy immediately ran toward Clara, his sturdy legs carrying him across the yard with determination. "Mama, did you see?" "I didn't fall off once." Clara knelt carefully, gathering her son into her arms. "You were very brave, my love, just like your papa." "Can I ride again tomorrow?" Thomas asked, his gray eyes so like his father's wide with excitement. "We'll see," she replied, smoothing his dark hair. "Now go wash up for lunch." Aunt Sarah brought apple pie. As Thomas dashed into the house, Zach approached, his easy stride so familiar now that Clara could recognize it without looking up. He knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her rounded stomach. "How are my 2 favorite people today?" he asked, helping her to her feet. "We're fine," Clara assured him, covering his hand with hers. "Though your daughter has been doing some vigorous kicking this morning." Zach grinned. "Already stubborn, just like her mama." Clara raised an eyebrow. "I prefer to call it determined." "Determined it is," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Just like the determined young woman who changed my life when I rode into a little farm outside Wickenburg 5 years ago." Clara leaned into his embrace, marveling as she often did at the journey that had brought them here from a lonely young woman convinced she'd never be chosen, to this life full of love and purpose. "I was thinking," Zach said as they walked hand in hand toward the house, "if this little one is a girl, maybe we could name her Eleanor." Clara smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Eleanor Rose Irving. I think that sounds perfect." Inside, Thomas was already chattering away to his Aunt Sarah, recounting his pony ride with elaborate gestures. The cozy kitchen smelled of apple pie and coffee, the afternoon sun casting warm patches of light across the well-worn floor. This was the life Clara had never dared to dream of: a loving husband who saw her strength, not her limitations. A beautiful son with his father's smile and her determination. A home filled with laughter and possibility, and another child on the way who would grow up knowing they were cherished from their very first breath. As Zach pulled out her chair and helped her sit, his hand lingering on her shoulder in a casual caress, Clara caught his eye and smiled. The words didn't need to be spoken aloud between them anymore. They lived them every day. "I choose you." Every time.